Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Cap MMA show. A little bit of a rough start there for the stream. First time I ever set up the broadcast to go live. It gave me a few little issues there. Everything seems to be going pretty smooth now. Hopefully that's all working over there. Welcome to a Cap MMA special report. I'm your host, Joe White. Today is Monday, January 6th, 2024. Some of my co-hosts will be along pretty soon here. Shout out to Trace, Usman, Mike, and Tony. All right, let's get this thing moving here. But first, this show is brought to you by our very own website, capmma.com, the best place for your side-by-side odds, so that you can make sure you are getting the best lines for your bets. Money line odds, overs and unders, a scorecard database, the most recent headlines, and much, much more. It's all 100% free and 100% ad-free. With that said, Tommy Toehold, let's do this shit. Okay, so a little bit on the broadcast. You'll notice that there's a camera up here. We're live in Spaces right now. I had the audio muted because I'm running dual mics, but we're live in Spaces right now, and we're live on YouTube right now. So tonight's show is basically about the PFL and the fact that I think they are a scam, pump and dump. I think that they are destined to fail, and I think the evidence is pretty damning. About halfway through the show, I will get into conversations between myself and a former PFL employee. I am allowing that employee to remain anonymous, but I did certainly verify their identity and their status or former status with the PFL. With that said, some of you may or may not have read the article I wrote in July about the PFL and their financial blunders and situations. For those of you who have, great. For those of you who have not, I'm going to go ahead and read it. It'll probably take me 4 or 5 minutes, hopefully no longer than that. But it's a good premise to start the show. Before I get going, I see Trace jumping into space over here. I don't know if he is able to get on audio or not, or Usman, but I will get you guys jumped in after I get the report going here. So back in July, on the 19th of this year, I wrote and published this article on the Cap MMA X page. And forgive me, I'm not versed in reading aloud, but I can read, so here we go. The report read, according to Sharif Carrick of Bloomberg News, PFL founder Don Davis recently said the company is now valued at about $1 million, or $1 billion. Yep, $1 billion, nearly double the $500 million valuation CNBC reported in 2022. Let's take a realistic look at this claim. In 2017, to create the PFL, co-founders purchased the World Series of Fighting. While the promotion was not consistently profitable, the new owners would gain rights to fighter contracts and a broadcasting deal with a top 5 sports network, NBCSN, NBC Sports Network. The idea was to take this failing brand and use it to build the PFL framework around. The Professional Fighters League introduced a new league format with a regular season, playoffs, and championship, which would differentiate, grammar isn't always that great, guys, would differentiate it from other MMA promotions, aiming to attract more traditional sports fans. In 2018, the PFL debuted its new seasonal league format. Initially piquing the interest of many longtime MMA fans, the company saw enough success to secure a broadcasting deal with ESPN, the already exclusive U.S. broadcasting partner of the UFC. Though this initially seemed like a stand to compete on the same stage as the world's MMA leader, it has since proved to be more of a tactic to just be seen where the UFC is seen. Whenever asked about the PFL's growth, owner Don Davis struggles to measure the company the company by the struggles not to measure the company by the UFC's market share, even given metrics for numbers of UFC viewers on ESPN that have watched the PFL. Facing normal hurdles and boundaries like injuries and weight cut issues, the PFL's league format has struggled to separate itself from that of a typical Grand Prix format over the past 7 years, even causing them to disregard their system of meritocracy for pay-per-view events referred to as supercards in an attempt to generate revenue. Including the initial investment from the co-founders, 21 primary investors have contributed $331 million as of July 1, 2024. If we start our math at April 19, 2017, the day the PFL purchased the World Series of Fighting, the company has raised $125,000 per day on average over 2,631 days. Impressive. However, it's worth noting there is little to no MMA or combat sports experience amongst these investors. In late 2023, the PFL acquired Bellator in a stock equity deal with Paramount Global. Top MMA insiders estimated the deal to settle between $200 million and $300 million in stock equities. Prior to the acquisition, the PFL's valuation was much lower, somewhere in the area of $500 million to $600 million. Even if the deal settled at $200 million, the PFL likely gave up 25% to 37.5% equity. If this amount were backday equity out, backlogged to April 19, 2017, signifying roughly 37.5% share. Bellator was profitable, but the numbers were not staggering. Leading up to being acquired, Bellator's estimated total revenue was $38,700,000 with an annual estimated expenditure of around $28 million. Seemingly, the real upside for PFL was gaining rights to more fighter contracts. However, the PFL was not able to sign all of the Bellator fighters into new PFL contracts. As a result, PFL was forced to keep the brand and promotion intact for at least 2 having to release fighters from those newly acquired contracts. The Bellator brand and fighter contracts likely consume the budget of 2 full PFL leagues annually. On top of that, some Bellator fighters will be able to fight their contracts out and leave after having never fought for the PFL. Bellator's new broadcasting deal is not likely enough to offset this, with PFL having to keep Bellator intact. Checking my screens here, guys. Sorry about that. I'm running through them. It's a one-man deal here. So here we go. PFL keeps numbers related to their broadcasting deal pretty tight-lipped, but it's safe to say if they were even in the ballpark of the UFC's deal, we would know. It likely doesn't offset cost at any large capacity. It would make sense that the PFL would be willing to take very little from ESPN just to be on the network. Doing some long math with average fighter pay, fight counts, tournament payouts, venue cost, and so on, we estimate 160 to 200 million spent on production. On top of that, we know the PFL has a fairly aggressive marketing team. Did a little research. We estimate 10% of total revenue, $33 million spent on marketing. We place the overall spent guesstimate at $225 million, around $85,000 per day since April 19, 2017. This aligns with Don Davis's recent suggestions that the company has spent about $250 million to expand over the last 5 years. The PFL markets its ability to become the MMA co-leader through brand recognition and fighter equity, but instead exhibits a deep dependency on being signed to the same network as the UFC, paired with the tactic of continuously poking at them, begging for attention. All publicity is good publicity, right? By having a TV deal on the same network as the UFC, the PFL is able to try and switch UFC viewers into dual brand viewers under the premise it's a free ad for the viewer as they already pay for the ESPN Plus service. Despite being on ESPN, most view PFL as a B rate product. Their biggest flaw is building the brand on ESPN in the shadow of the UFC, then begging for the UFC's recognition, never citing the PFL's desire to be the leader, only the co leader. Even that is a soft marketing tactic to lure the UFC into cross promotion in hopes of winning market share. Don Davis's X profile I wrote this 6 months ago, has a banner of John Jones next to Francis Ngannou at a PFL event. The entire thing is a pyramid built on the gamble that the UFC won't leave ESPN. If the UFC did leave ESPN, the PFL's viewership would drop dramatically and likely lead to closure quickly considering the operating costs. The UFC can profit on any platform at this point. So how does it make sense? A company that's built around a failing company that has spent $250 million in liquid assets, that has no brick and mortar assets, whose biggest financial move was not paying to acquire a competitor that nobody else would pay for either, keeps growing in value. It just doesn't. It doesn't. They're fucking lying. In 2023, the PFL did acquire Bellator, but did not pay for Bellator because it wasn't worth the cash. No one on earth would have paid $200 million liquid for Bellator, or even $50 million of that for that matter. So PFL decided that they would give Paramount Global a huge minority stake in PFL for Bellator, a company Paramount Global was likely going to close anyway. Why? Market control. PFL bought first right to negotiate with Bellator fighters first and stall them from going to the UFC for up to 2 years. I believe that wholeheartedly. Guys. There's not an ounce of me that does not believe that they needed Bellator to stop the UFC from acquiring any of those contracts. They did not want to go into negotiation for those contracts against the UFC. Many investors build companies with an exit strategy. They financially push a company to its desired value, then sell it. Well, Don Davis's Twitter profile says VC investor, venture capital investor, in 12 $1 billion plus or 12 $1 billion exit companies. The PFL is searching for investors with ties to large investment groups and deep bankrolls to fund their too big to fail ideology. Get enough wealthy people invested and it can't fail because big money doesn't lose big money, right? The idea that the PFL is worth $1 billion in 2024 is inaccurate, or 2025 is inaccurate and a ploy to raise money for less stock. No one on earth with $1 billion would pay $1 billion for the PFL, so it's not worth $1 billion, plain and simple. The PFL is the Titanic of MMA, and the investors are its passengers. Got pretty good community reaction when that article dropped. Some big media names, I won't mention them, liked it, commented. Was pretty proud of that piece, and I stood pretty strong on it. Couple weeks ago, a former PFL employee contacted me, and I wrote out how it went when when I verify their ID, but I hate being on this script. I don't do these shows on a script. I don't do anything we do on a script. So I hate even reading these articles and even reading what I wrote for the rest of this piece. Excuse me there. But I get a message that says, I used to work for PFL, and I say, okay, how do I know that? And they say, here's my name. And I say, okay, well, I've been able to verify that someone by that name worked at the PFL. I have no way to know that's you, but sure, let's talk. I don't hear anything from them for a few days. And then I get a message and a picture of their identification. They take a photo of their ID and they send it to me. Did block out a couple of details, like license number and things like that. But name was very visible and a couple of other small details, very visible, no marks over them. They just used a phone, like an iPhone to scribble over it. I ran the photo through 2 AI systems, twice on one of them, 3 times on the other. I inspected the image. I've been photo editing for, I think, 20 years now. Like 20 years now. I inspected it at 2,000 times zoom. I probably spent 15, 20 minutes inspecting the areas that I thought would be most manipulated at 2,000 times zoom. I couldn't find anything. I probably spent another 15 minutes just generally going over the entire thing between 1,000 and 2,000 times zoom. I just can't find anything that indicates that it's not a real picture. I can't find a system that checks and verifies photos that doesn't say that it's a legit photo. So we're going to go with this person is who they say they are. They did ask to not be named, probably likely, even though this is a small channel, if it were to get spotted by future employers, it just may not look well for them. So I agreed to keep their name sealed. We will call them Tanya. Tanya contacted me. Her and I had a conversation. It was rather long. There were certain things that I had to redact because it would tell you what Tanya's position with the PFL was, or timestamp that position, which essentially would tell them who that is. I don't know how much that would affect them if PFL figured it out, but I made a promise and I'm going to keep it. So with that said, everything I say on Tanya's behalf is a direct quote. I did not manipulate any words. If things sound a little weird or a little choppy, it was a text with replies. I did not take anything out of order in the sense of a narrative. I did not rearrange anything that was said in sense of a narrative. Because it was a chat conversation and you might reply to the same question 2 or 3 times throughout the chat, I did take those quotes and bunch them together. And then if there was another topic, I did take those quotes and bunch them together. But I did them in order so that they would be in order of relevance, so that it would sound however it looked in the chat. Only a few things were removed to prevent or take caution to not reveal who Tanya is. With that said, I'm going to get into the conversation between me and Tanya. I'm not going to talk about much of what I said because I feel like the things that Tanya said will make it evident what I asked. There's no reason to be repetitive with that type of stuff. So I started the conversation asking Tanya how she was hired into the PFL. Was recruited by an agency and went solely because of the money. Ultimately decided to leave because I've never worked with so many incompetent people in my career. The company solely exists so that someone dumb enough will buy to bailed Don, the CEO, out. Exact text, even if it was choppy. During my tenure, I've heard multiple times if they got an offer, they would likely sell. The alternative plan is to go public in 5 years. However, they'd be open to more scrutiny via the SEC and other shareholders. If you look at the recent stats that Don if you look at the PFL stats that Don recently tweeted, I can assure you they are lies. I do have those loaded up on a screen here. The keyboard that runs all this stuff is giving us a really hard time right now. I'm not sure why, but here we go. I got them up on the screen for the YouTube channel. Those are the stats that he tweeted. Says that they're all lies. I do fact check all of the things that Tanya said to the best of my ability. We will get into that after the conversation. For example, in 2023, they paid an agency, Sasha, to run an engagement, follower in parentheses, campaign in order to get to 1 million IG followers. This was a direct request from the board of directors. The problem is those followers are mostly bot accounts that are considered low quality. This cost them $750,000 alone. They did this for TikTok and Twitter as well. However, IG became a priority after a board meeting. They were fixated on getting to 1 million. The work environment was a nightmare. Pete Murray is more worried about PowerPoint decks and useless work than properly promoting the product. Social media team have to do things without Pete's knowledge or approval. Every video and every piece of creative is approved by Pete, which slows everything down. Tanya explained to me that new recruits are given company shares. In order to recruit new employees, they offer equity. These are quotes from Tanya again. That last line was me, but these are quotes from Tanya again. In order to recruit new employees, they offer equity. It's just like owning stock. You can sell whenever you please. You get them right away, but you get to keep them if you work long enough. I think people try to stay at PFL long enough to have their shares vested, but anybody with a functional brain knows the company is a joke. Right now, they are recruiting a lot of WWE employees to pull from TKO. I feel bad for those employees. They are walking into a shit show. For prospective employees, everything is amazing. They're growing. Come be a part of something great. A long list of lies. I've personally never met Don, but Pete Murray projects delusion on a weekly basis. He often gets an idea in his head and won't let go of it. One of the craziest things about their ticket sales budget is that they can't come close to breaking even on marketing expenses alone. For example, they'll allocate a $50,000 budget to promote ticket sales in hopes of making $50K, to which they always fall short. The that decision making right there shows how financially inept leadership and folks at the VP level are. They spend money like the federal government with almost no ROI consideration. They go to every domestic event knowing they will comp 40% to 60% of the tickets just to try and save face. If the PFL has a chance to lie, exaggerate, or fudge any sort of number, whether it is for public or for the public or the board of directors, they will. So I'm not even sure if the board of directors really knows how bad things are. How much fake information they are being fed by the C-suite team from the VIP team. So it should have said from the C-suite team and the VIP team, which is the chief team, the chief officers, and then the vice president team. I'm not sure who instructs the fudging of the numbers. I assume it's Pete and Don combined. Here's an example. The pre-fight YouTube show they put out, they'll put money behind that to boost views on YouTube in hopes of getting a series or show sponsored. So I said earlier how the PFL keeps all of their ESPN numbers very hush-hush. So you never know what they're really doing on ESPN. They've said they have an average of 3 million viewers. We know that that's not true. So what they're doing is they're paying to pump up the prelims where all the numbers can be publicly audited on YouTube. They're pumping all of those numbers up so that they can say, look, yeah, this is what we do just on the prelims alone. Our numbers on ESPN are crazy. And they could forge documents. They could forge documents very easily, add a zero, add an apostrophe. Everything looks the way it's supposed to a new sponsor or a new company coming in. But the numbers are fake. Anyways, let me get back to what Tanya said. The C-suite and VPs get their marching orders from Pete Murray. They then distill those silly marching orders down to the employees. There isn't an open forum for any idea generation, critical thinking, etc. I then asked Tanya about the company's travels, just habits, what it looks like. It was a paragraph, but I just was looking for like an overview of traveling with the PFL as a company. Pete Murray flew first class. Regular employees flew coach or business class. They were really penny pinching when I left. I think about 20 or 30 non-production employees went to each event. Event management team, fighter ops, PR, marketing, etc., all went to events. What's interesting is they only became penny pinchers after the Saudis' first board meeting. Well, that's just common damn sense, isn't it? Of course. You think the Saudis are going to give you $100 million and just say, yeah, we trust you? And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the Saudis. That's any smart investor. But the Saudis are really, people think that sports fund is like, they're throwing money out, and they are, but they're investing a lot of money. These guys are buying into video game companies, holding enough stock to get on boards. They are not just throwing money around for no reason. They expect return, and they expect accountability. Another quote that is relevant to that: when the Saudis invested, they apparently wanted to invest more, but ownership didn't want to give up that much equity. Obviously, there was a couple more lines there, but they make no sense. It's kind of like where they were when they heard that, and I can't really divulge that. Obviously, the Saudis would be better off going all in with the UFC, expanding that partnership, which I'm sure the PFL is very much threatened by. A couple other things that Tanya said include there have been many celebrity investors over the years. We know that. I have the board up right here. I think I had it on the screen for a little bit earlier. I know I did. Kevin Hart, he's probably the biggest one. He's in a lot of these rounds. Tony Robbins, Jimmy Iovine, Alex Rodriguez. There are, and there's nothing wrong with that, and there's nothing suspicious about that. And then Tanya said, when an event is upcoming, We usually ask them to post for us to help promote the event. Not sure who is left. So there are a few quotes where Tanya begins speaking like Tanya is still at the company. I bring that up because I don't know that the person I verified worked at PFL. I don't know that they no longer work at PFL. I just positively know that they did. And I'm going to give up some information that current employees have posted about them. So I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if Tanya is being honest about no longer being with them, but I wouldn't be surprised if Tanya just doesn't want to tell me she's still with them. All right, here's another one. Remember the two teammates who fought each other in Atlanta regular season in 23? Afterwards, both fighters were DQ'd from the season. I think Pete Murray directly told our fighter ops team to make that decision. I would probably side with them on that. Except, that's why the UFC doesn't have a bullshit system where fighters don't get to pick who they fight. And that's why they don't put friends in the cage against each other. Because that bullshit happens. So you can't be mad at those guys. I mean, you can be disappointed in those guys. But they did their job. The suspicious thing was that Shane Burgos replaced whichever of the two was the winner. And for obvious reasons, they wanted Shane Burgos in that tournament. They had just spent a bunch of money on him. I think he lost in his debut. I think he debuted earlier in that tournament and lost. Last quote. I was told if they received an offer tomorrow, they would accept it. For what price, I have no idea. But this was always a pump and dump scheme. You heard me say that I think it's a pump and dump earlier. I've never actually used that term until now. Tanya used the term pump and dump. And when I heard it, I said, well, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? I guess that's exactly what that is, actually. So that is why I kind of stole that term from Tanya about the PFL. Obviously, it's a very famous term. So the first thing I wanted to do was fact check as much of this as I could. I didn't want to just say, okay, I verified the picture you showed me. I think that this is you. I really believe it. I'm willing to go public, make a report on it. You kind of just confirm the things that me and my team have been saying since before they bought Bellator. But that wasn't enough for me to say, oh, okay, yeah, you proved me right. So we're happy with that, and I'm just going to read that and be good with it. So what I did was I wasn't very surprised to see all of that. But the first thing I wanted to do, so Tanya brought up the stats by Don Davis. Okay, so some of those stats were pretty straightforward. 25 events. Let's see here. 25 events. Sure. 16,200 tickets sold. The PFL record, PFL Paris. I mean, I guess okay, but my biggest problem there is going to be that they comp a lot of these tickets, and we don't know what they are getting credit for that they shouldn't get credit for. It makes it tough. So I have a hard time. I don't want to say I know that one is false, but I've got pretty good reason to believe that that's not real. 2.5 million total views social media. I think they meant for one post. The Cap MMA page did that twice. We got like a couple hundred followers. I'm not saying that we're way up here. That's not what I'm getting at there.
But if we can do it, there's no reason the PFL shouldn't be able to do it multiple times. They have millions of followers between all of their platforms. 2.5 million views should be easy, easy. Maybe they meant billion. Okay, they didn't mean billion. We know they didn't mean billion. Man, what I did here is I screwed production up on the YouTube for all these screens, guys. I assigned a quick key for I assigned a quick key because I was experimenting, and it's also one of the keys that one of my arrows is on. So I'm having a very hard time flipping through the screens right now. Apologies. Second run, we're going to get this shit down like a one-man band with these buttons over here until I can get Tony involved. So from there, I kept fact checking. 24 million total social media followers. Sure, they probably got a couple pages I can't find. But if you go to the PFL's website and you just open the links to all their social media pages, it's 10.6. It's 10.6 million. Then if you go to Bellator's page, they carry the lion's share. It is 11.4 million followers, which gets them to like 22-ish. And sure, they probably got some other stuff somewhere that they can pull up that makes it 25 million or 24 million. Good for them. 85 PFL fighters, top 300 ranked. That's 28% of fighters. Top 300 fighters. That's not too bad. But I know Don Davis likes to use Fight Matrix, so I went over to fightmatrix.com and did a quick count of how many top 10 fighters PFL Bellator have combined in 14 divisions. Top 10. Now we're talking top 10, not top 300. Nobody cares about the top 20. And they don't even have all the divisions. So now you're talking about 25, top 25 in some divisions. That's nobody looks at that in the big rankings. Fighters don't aspire to become a top 37 fighter, top 30 fighter. They want to be in the top 10. They want to get to the top 15. They want to get to the top 5. Bellator has 22 of the 140 top fighters in the 14 divisions of MMA. 16%, which is nearly half of the number that Don Davis likes to inflate. But they have all of women's 145 plus. If you remove all of women's 145 plus, which they have 9 of them, they only have 13 of the other 130. So now you're getting down to 10% where they're realistically competing. No one else has that division. They have the top 10 because no one else fights women, has women fighting at those weights. So of course they win there. But if you remove those, now they're down to 10%, and then you can go to like light heavyweight. I think they have 3 or 4 there. So like if you remove those 2 divisions, they have like 6 fighters. And it's they're very good at taking the numbers and bending the numbers and folding the numbers to make the numbers look a certain way. Number 1 pound for pound, Cyborg and Francis. Sure, that's a fair debate for them. 3 million global views linear per streamed event. Yeah, fuck off. I'm not. Fuck off. I don't. Are you talking about like every time someone clicks it? You're streaming this shit on every platform you can. You're counting your prelims. Like, I'm sure they're figuring out how to manipulate their way almost there, but I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it. Company would be far more successful than it actually is if 3 million people were watching every event. The CAGR rate. So that is compound annual growth rate. So that's them trying to say that they 50% compound annual growth rate. They're trying to pump up their own evaluation, which is bullshit. And then they put $100 million in revenue on there. I guess that's the Saudi investors' money. You fucking lose money at every event. We know this. We know this hard fact. You lose money at every single event you do. And now all of the sudden we're going to go with, you made $100 million. No, it was revenue, money that you ran through, if anything. But it's just the Saudi money. It's the $100 million the Saudis gave them. What else did they have on that list? 2 times PFL versus Major League Soccer viewership. U.S. per event. I will. I don't know what bullshit they're trying to handpick. Who was here, who was there, who was doing this, so they can say, oh, that's bullshit. There's no fucking way they compete with soccer in any matrix other than cherry picking a few events and saying, oh, we won. From there, what else did I have? Tanya specifically mentioned $750K to the Sasha group to get the PFL to 1 million IG followers, and then TikTok as well. So I emailed the Sasha group. I actually emailed them and asked if they would comment on whether or not the PFL actually paid them. I got nothing. I sent 2 emails. Well, on their website you can submit. I didn't send formal emails. I assume it submits an email for you. They did not comment back. But I decided to go audit the PFL social media. And you're like, Joe, who the fuck are you to audit someone's social media? Well, it's 2024. There's this thing called socialblade.com. You go there, it gives you all their social media numbers. You can click each individual profile here. This thing is going to shoot us down to the bottom, and we'll go back up. Holding through screens here, right here. Socialblade.com. So I took those numbers, plugged them into ChatGPT. ChatGPT said 0.41% engagement, less than 1%. Based on the provided data, the follower account likely includes a substantial portion of inactive or fake accounts. This is evident by the very low engagement rate relative to the follower base. TikTok, 0.28% engagement rate. Less than 1%. Less than 1%. The total likes are rational relative to video count, but the low average like per post versus follower count strongly suggests the follower count is inflated or the audience is not genuinely engaged. That's called bots. That's called they paid for their followers and they have a bunch of bots. Yep. Can't imagine having 1 million